Well, a huge thank you to Dr. Eckert and the good folks here at St. Paul's, and to all my good Gottesdienst friends for the opportunity to be with you guys the 500th anniversary of the Reformation and reflect together on Reformation and liturgy, two topics that I dearly love. I have to tell you, I started out today about 2 hours south of Lake Superior, where on Saturday we installed my son-in-law. It's pastor of a dual parish up there. And by the time I got here, the stupid GPS took me all kinds of back ways. And I was like, okay, I am so tired. I just sat down, and then that St. Anne prelude, I was like, okay, now I'm ready to go. That was glorious. And then it just kept on going on from there. Wonderful to have a beautiful Vesper service to kick off the whole event. Wonderful. Thank you. If we're going to deal with the Reformation, we need to deal with what the people were actually experiencing. How many of you guys have checked out on YouTube any of the recreated medieval masses? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. There's one, the Swedish. That's probably one of the best ones, and there's an English one. And what's really just fascinating is our temptation is to always think that what's going on in the divine service that we're sort of familiar with is what the divine service was like in the Middle Ages. And, you know, it is a different world when you watch what they were doing, okay? So for Luther, the divine service, when he, what he inherited, picture, the big old rude screen kind of blocking the way so that the people really couldn't see much of what was happening at the altar. Picture of course, everything's in Latin. And of course, as they read the readings, how do they read them? Facing the altar. Yeah, it's like my good friend John Stevenson once said, I just so love an east-facing altar. It confesses that the congregation is a liturgical adiaphoron. Well, that is how the medieval church seemed to think about it, that the congregation itself was a liturgical adiaphoron. No, they are not. But that's how the people experienced it. So they go to church. And what were they doing? What would they do? How many of you people in this room have actually read the book, Why Catholics Can't Sing? It's a great book. There's a funny story in the book, Why Catholics Can't Sing. And it's right after Vatican II. And the guy goes to Mass, and you come to the sharing of the peace. And he's sitting next to this woman in the pew, and she's got her rosary. And she's praying a rosary all through the service and ignoring everything that's happening, praying a rosary, right? So when it comes to the peace, he's kind of timid, and he walks up and he says, the peace of the Lord be with you. To which she stopped long enough to look up and say, I don't believe in that stuff, only that's not what she said. And then she went right back to her rosary, because that's how she had experienced the Mass growing up, right? You come to church and something's happening up there, and you just say your prayers and do your devotions. And, maybe, in the 20th century, it became common for people to commune often. You guys remember how often people were communing in the Middle Ages? You had to commune once a year. You had to commune at Easter time, because the whole point of the Mass wasn't about receiving communion. That wasn't what it was for. What was the Mass for? Say, you're a peasant. You haven't been very good in your life. No. Pretty bad. And so, when you die, it's going to be kind of not good. You're going to have to go to purgatory, because there ain't no way you're getting into heaven. So, and the suffering's going to be kind of bad there. So what are you going to do? You really want somebody to be able to offer the sacrifice of the Mass, remembering you at the altar, right? If you're a peasant, you're kind of out of luck. You don't have any money.
I'm going to go steal some. No,
there you go. You can endow a Mass. But the rich guy, he has the money. He can actually pay for that. And so you have all these. Picture the scene. You're in the room where you've all just prayed vigils together. all of you. And then those of you who are priests, divide up and go to all the side altars and proceed to offer Mass, because all those Masses had been endowed. And you need to apply all of that to all those dead people. The Mass primarily was for the dead. That's how they thought of it. Now, when Luther began the Reformation, it was kind of like the leaven in the yeast, in the dough. It doesn't all rise at once. It takes time, right? So where did the Reformation actually get started? I mean, where was his attention at the beginning? Indulgences, which lived where? Yeah. The confessional, right? He was ticked off that the people that were coming to him for confession were not showing up because they had their indulgence. They didn't do that anymore. He was like, now wait a minute, right? So that's where it starts. It takes him a little bit of time before he actually turns his attention to the Mass. And what I will hope to trace tomorrow is how the aha finally happens to him that, wait a cotton picking minute, we got this thing going backwards. How did the medieval church do it? From us to God. A sacrifice that is offered for the dead. And the big thing is to be there. You don't have to receive it. You just need to be in the presence of it as the sacrifice is being offered, because the church told you it's a holy day of obligation. You had to be there. So there you are. But you don't have to worry about receiving it. You maybe receive it once, twice a year. If you're very pious, maybe 4 times a year. And Luther, as he's literally lecturing on Hebrews 9. And if you're lecturing, what do? You study the great teachers, right? So all Luther's doing is cribbing Chrysostom, and he admits it. And he says, so let us follow Chrysostom on this. He's going along. And then all of a sudden he goes, wait a minute. He doesn't say anything more about the fact that Jesus, the night he died, or was preparing to die, the night he was betrayed, he instituted what's the big word? Oh, this is, we are impoverished if we do not know this word. Supper. Not supper. Ooh, boo. Say it again. A testamentum. Yeah. A testament. Christ, on the night he is preparing to die, establishes a testament. And what's a testament do? It's the last will. It's the last will and testament. It tells you, I'm getting ready to die. When I die, this person or that person is my heir, and this is what I am giving to them, to you. This is what I'm leaving you. So Luther looked at it and went, we're offering it to him, but as he gave it to us, is the other way around. He had something that he wanted to give to us. If you're offering it to him, it doesn't matter if you're receiving it, right? If he's offering it to you, well, it matters that you receive it. So he sort of puts this on the back burner. Not that much happens for a few years. Then he decides he's already in so much hot water, might as well keep going. So he actually starts writing about the Mass. He writes about the Lord's, the sacrament of the altar in 1519. He writes a sermon on it that's, it's not bad. He's not really being radical. But then at 1520, he decides, all right, we're going after this thing. And he titles his piece that he's writing, The New Testament, that is, the Holy Mass. And he makes a distinction that will be fundamental for all Lutheran theology going forward. What is essential and what is reverent and fitting additions. What is essential is that you have the words of Jesus joined to what Jesus says to join those words to, and that gift received. And he says everything else is a reverent and fitting addition. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. He sort of allows that. A little later in the year, he's like, and there's stuff in there that's not reverent and not fitting too. And we need to deal with that as well. There's stuff in there that is actually conflicting with the gift that he's giving. He's getting feisty as he goes along. But it's striking. 1520, he'd realized this in 1518, 1520. He still hasn't done anything. And people reading his stuff were like, well, man, now you're giving us crisis of conscience. Here we are. We're standing here at the altar saying these words, the priest's word, these words, right? And these words have, I offer, I sacrifice. He's like, how do we do that? How can we do this with integrity? How do we actually say the Mass? And that's his first liturgical writing, 1523. It is not an order by itself. All it is instructions for somebody who has come to share his conviction of how to actually use the medieval missal and make it work. And does anybody remember what he did? Because it really was ingenious. What did he do? Everything's pretty much the same, so you get to the Mass. To the sacrament. Then, the Lord be with you, Dominus vobiscum, et cum spiritu tuo. It's all in Latin, right? He leaves it all in Latin. Up with your hearts, sursum corda, we have them in the Lord. And then, let us give thanks to the Lord our God. It is right and just. It is indeed right and just. He has all four, right, just, salutary, meet, right, and salutary. We should at all times and all places give thanks to you, Holy Lord, Almighty Father, everlasting God. He had it in the right order, not in those three parts. Everlasting God, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Then, what? Anyone remember? Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who, on the night when he was betrayed, or on the day before he suffered, he's still using the Latin terms, right? And this is how the Roman canon ran. On the night before he suffered, took bread, gave thanks, broke it, gave it to the disciples, and said, there it is. There's your words of institution. And for the first time, the people were actually hearing them. And when they heard them, the priest was singing them out loud. What tone was being used?
Gospel.
The Pater Noster tune. He leaves them in 1523 as prayer. They're in a prayer, and he sets them to a prayer tone and leaves it that way. At the end of the words of institution, though, the Sanctus, the Benedictus, and then the weird thing is it all flowed so smoothly, although the people did get to hear the words for the first time. Most of the people didn't notice that anything had changed. And they're like, so what was the big deal? Well, I don't understand. What was the fight about? Because all of the canon was being prayed silently. They didn't hear it. And Luther's like, isn't God smart? He kept the people from hearing most of that garbage. He decided I better write an essay, a treatise, to let them know all the junk that was in that prayer. So he does a treatise on the abomination of the private Mass. He lets them know what's in this prayer that the priest is praying privately. And he, beyond shadow of doubt, interprets it in the most unkind way that he can, from start to finish. Okay, 1523. How well is that going to set with the people after all this stuff's been perking, still having it in Latin? They're going to be like, yeah, but you said, wouldn't it be great to have it all in German, right? So give it to us in German. So 1526, he actually does put together a German service. This is his most radical proposal. And in this service, he does a whole bunch of things that Dr. Eckert and others really have not liked, right? He paraphrases, in rhymed paraphrase, parts of the liturgy that were just canonicals, right? Instead of singing Sanctus, 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 you're singing Isaiah, mighty seer in days of old, right? He substitutes all this. But the most radical thing is what he does when he gets to the service of the sacrament. The preface is it gone? He never says, the Lord be with you and also with you. But he also takes, let us lift up your hearts. He takes that and he says, how do you lift up your heart? How do you lift up your heart to God? How do you do it? How do you do it?
Like Jeremiah did. Pray.
By praying.
Praying and confession.
Jesus gives you the prayer to lift up your heart to God, the Our Father, right? So you say the Our Father back to God. This is how you lift up your heart to God, by praying, Our Father who art in heaven. So he gives you a paraphrase of the Lord's Prayer to use to lift up your heart to God. And then let us give thanks to the Lord our God. And let me tell you what you should be giving thanks to God for. And he lists it out. And then when he's done with that, then he says, now, give attention to the testament of Christ. And then there's silence. And then he sings it. And this time, the words are just straight from the gospel, conflated from all the gospels, so he didn't lose anything in St. Paul. He conflates them, and he sings them this time to the gospel tone. And the people hearing it would go, oh, so this is actually a gospel reading that we're hearing. Sing it with me. You guys know how to sing it, right? Our Lord Jesus Christ, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, stop. Stop. When you get to that point, you need to do it the way that the books all annotate it, which is what? I listened to my son, and this is being recorded. My son-in-law is going to yell at me for this. When my son-in-law did it this morning, he actually did it at the same tempo. Take, eat, this is my body, which is given for you, this do and remember. And our book doesn't seem to indicate anything else. That's wrong. It's just wrong. In all the old German manuals, it is given with longer notes throughout that entire words of Jesus. Take, eat, this is my body, which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me. Then go back to the other tempo. In the same way also, he took the cup after supper, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink of it, all of you. And you might get the impression that something really important is happening there, and that these words are absolutely vital, and you need to pay attention to them. And then as soon as he's done the consecration, then Isaiah Mighty Seer. And why did he like Isaiah Mighty Seer? Does anybody remember the little comment he throws in Deutsche Messe? I love this, he says, because it goes so well with the elevation. Holy is God, the Lord of Sabaoth. There, you can't see him, but he's there. Holy, this is the body and blood of the holy, 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 right here in front of you. So he puts the Sanctus actually in the same place in both masses. It follows after it. This is Luther's proposal. It's just a proposal. What finally settles is what the church orders decide. And they don't always do what Luther says. So Luther said, Alleluia is the perpetual song of the church. And the church order said, we actually kind of like Lent, and we're going to keep it. So that Alleluia is going to be omitted. So they kept that kind of stuff, right? But Luther's words did have great weight. Tomorrow, I really want to trace through 3 representative orders of how it came down. The one that I'm particularly interested in for us as Lutheran Church Missouri Synod people is the Herzog Heinrich order from 1539, 1540. This is the one. It comes from Justus Jonas, Luther's compatriot, and Luther himself certainly had a hand in it. This is Johann Gerhard. He is going to shape it into his version, the Casimiriana, but it's the same order there. It's the order that shapes J.S. Bach. This order lasted so long in Lutheranism from 1539 to 1540, all the way up to the Saxon Enlightened agenda at the beginning of the early 18th century. You'll never get the Missouri Synod if you don't get the big part of the fight was, we want to be able to worship the old way with the old book and not use that book that the government is shoving down our face right now that has all this weird new stuff in it. We want the old order. So when they come to America, the first thing they do is to publish an agenda, right? 1856. And the 1856 agenda is basically reaching back over the Enlightened agenda to the old way, that old Saxon way of worship. This is what they did in German, and they were so concerned that this be provided that in 1881, they give it in English. English! People tell you the Missouri Synod didn't care about English. Bull Twinkie! Absolute nonsense. 1881, two professors at Concordia Seminary translate the entire Saxon agenda into English, church liturgy for congregations of the unaltered Augsburg Confession, and it is gold. Gold. But it's different from what all the other Lutherans were putting together in 1888, 8 or 6? 6 or 8 for the common service. I think it's 1888. So all the other Lutherans in America put together a service, and the English-speaking people in Missouri then sort of had a tug of war. Which one of these services are we going to have? The common service, that's your page 15, Divine Service 3, or this Saxon service that we sort of fought for? Which one is it going to be? All the way up till 1936, Missouri Synod. Well, what do you think we do? What do we do today? Open up your Lutheran service book, and what do you see?
They're all in there.
They're all in there because we can't make up our minds. We even got 2 different orders for Matins and Vespers, right? Because we don't want to offend anybody that like the new stuff, so we'll get the new stuff and the old stuff, and we'll put it all together and pretend they're different. And so all these orders were in there. You had this even until 1936. The last published version of Liturgy and Agenda of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod had the Divine Service, first form, common service, and the Divine Service, second form, Saxon service. They couldn't decide. TLH comes out, they're like, we're going to go with the one all the other Lutherans have gone with. Deal with it. Hence the famous rubric. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Peepcorn saying, we've nailed it down. This is the end of it. The discussion is done. This is the service that we will use. That's the meaning of that 1960 rubric in the Lutheran liturgy. Ouch. It didn't work. So when Lutheran Book of Worship comes out, what pops back in? The chorale service. And it's in LW, and it's in Divine Service 5. It won't go away. And the reason it won't go away is because it actually is a very important piece of our heritage. So we're going to discuss tomorrow in detail about whether or not that's a bad thing or a good thing. And we're going to talk about 2 other representative orders real briefly. I'll tell you the Swedish one, which is one of the most fascinating ones, only one to run with the Formula Missa form of the liturgy. And then the other one we're going to look at is the Braunschweig-Wolfenbüttel, which was put together by Andrea and Chemnitz, who didn't particularly like each other, working together liturgically as well as theologically, right, to put together a service. CPH actually published that puppy in English now. You can read the whole thing. We'll cover that. Anyway, I've gone on too long, but I just want to get the impression out there. When the gospel joy erupts, it actually erupted specifically at the point of the canon and insisted that the canon had to be shoved, this prayer of thanksgiving. And I'm going to argue tomorrow that it doesn't mean that you can't have a prayer of thanksgiving. That is not something Luther said. That is not something Luther believed. But it does mean that whatever prayer of thanksgiving is there cannot obscure the words of Jesus. That's what matters. That's the payload from which the joy comes. Okay?